Hey guys, welcome to another video here on Tech Savvy, where I will actually be talking about a 2017 release. Now I know that I said in a previous video that I haven't really been consistent when it comes to keeping up with new releases, especially recently, because it is a little bit difficult trying to manage my time between school and so many albums that I really want to listen to. And I have listened to a lot of music this year, you know, not only in the metal realm, just kind of all over the place, and maybe one day I will talk about some of the greater albums that I've heard this year. But I do think that there are some albums in the genres that this channel covers that deserve to be talked about and need some light shed on them. And one of them was one of my most anticipated albums of this year, and that is Disperse's Foreword. Now, the reason I was anticipating this album so much is because when I heard songs off of Living Mirrors back in 2013, I was just blown away. It was progressive metal, but it had a different vibe, a vibe that could only really be described as Disperse. And 4 years later, here we are with Foreword, and that Disperse vibe has not left. It's still there. It still sounds like Disperse, but there's definitely new elements here. There's definitely a huge influence from indie pop. You know, songs like Does It Matter How Far have a very indie pop vibe. Speaking of, the second half of that song is so beautiful. The whole thing is, it's 9 minutes long, but just something about the second half just hits me in the heart. So beautiful. You know, other songs that kind of have that indie pop vibe would be Tether, Sleeping Ivy, also another great song. You know, every song on here is fantastic, honestly, but kind of getting ahead of myself. Like I was saying, even with those new elements kind of sprinkled throughout the music, this album still has a Disperse vibe. It's still very atmospheric, very proggy, and you know, I think it's a good balance between prog rock and prog metal. It's not too heavy, but it's also not too steady. I know that rhymes, but you know. Anyway, another thing that I wanted to say is that Jakub Zateski, I hope I'm pronouncing that name right, just one of my favorite guitarists in modern prog. You know, he can write heavy riffs, he can write atmospheric riffs, and no matter what he's playing on the guitar, it just sounds so sincere. And even with that, you know, passion behind it, it still can be so technical. You're sitting there and you're listening to these riffs and you're just like, what the how did you come up with this? But it's also real. It feels like it's something that he wanted to write. It feels like it came from his heart. And it's just, like I was saying, it's just so sincere, so atmospheric, so beautiful. And all of the instruments on this album are fantastic. The drum work, insane. The bass work really stands out. And the vocals, just like on Living Mirrors, fantastic. And Jakub actually does some vocals on this album as well. Now, I guess if I had to mention some favorite songs, I don't not like any song on here. I think every song on here is fantastic. You know, there are some that I play more often than others. Surrender is one of my favorite songs. It's track number 2, and it was actually the third single they released for this album. Just an amazing song. I can't really explain what it is about that song, and, you know, every song kind of just keeps progressing. You know, it's progressive metal. It's gonna enter new areas, and, you know, it's not gonna stay in the same place for too long, but it will bring back recurring themes. So that's why it's kind of hard to explain what I love about different songs, because it's so progressive. It's so filled with content. There's so many great riffs and great standout moments on this album. And something that I really love about this album is that, you know, Disperse has always kind of had this atmosphere to them, this beautiful, beautiful atmosphere that's very hard to explain, like I was saying. But there's something added in this album that is just awesome to me, and that's the use of undefined voices. Throughout several tracks, Stay, Surrender, like I was saying, even the track Foreword, Neon, you know, the majority of the tracks on here feature these undefined voices. You don't know where they're coming from. They sound like choirs of children sometimes. Sometimes they sound like just a singular adult just kind of singing there, and there's no credit on that. It's just voices. And they did a little bit of that on Living Mirrors as well. I remember on the song Message from Atlantis, by the end of that song, there was a woman vocal that came through. And I loved that. I thought that was so cool that it doesn't say like featuring this person. It's just a voice. And it adds so much atmosphere because you can't pinpoint where that voice is coming from, what that voice even is. it's just so beautiful, and the way it all comes together with the music, the the voices, like I was saying, just it's mesmerizing. This is a mesmerizing piece of music, and I know that some people might be a little bit scared to walk into it, hearing that it has a lot of indie pop vibes to it, but it doesn't take it over. There's still a prog edge. There's still this atmospheric, just world to this album that is just amazing, and I don't even know. I don't even know how to explain it. I tried my best. But I guess to mention a few more favorite tracks, Sleeping Ivy, beautiful. Neon is gorgeous. Gabriel has an amazing riff. But like I said, I can't really choose favorites because this is an album where just from start to finish, you're engaged. It's just an engaging album. Definitely check it out if you haven't heard of it or heard it yet. If you're a fan of Disperse, you're going to like this. If you're a fan of progressive music, you may really like this. I think this may be a hit or miss album, but I do think that it deserves a chance. I do think that the music here is just amazing. I wouldn't say it was my favorite album that I've heard this year so far. I will talk about that one maybe in the next discussion, but this album is seriously, it's gonna make my top list if I make one. If I were to make a top albums list of the year for prog albums, this would be on it, hands down. It was definitely worth the wait. I do think that those 4 years that they were gone making an album were worth it. They definitely put their minds to work, and they challenged themselves. Not really challenged themselves, but they took risks and they executed them perfectly, and they made it their own. Even with the risks here, they're still dispersed, and they're still making atmospherically gorgeous music that will engage you, and that's why I love Foreword. Definitely check it out if you haven't heard it yet. Like I said, maybe by this point I'm getting redundant again, but that's what passion does to you. So thank you guys for watching. Again, if you want to hear it, look it up. Beautiful album, and I will be doing more of these when I have an album to talk about. I already have one queued up, maybe a few, but we'll see what happens. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.